So for this project, I'm making a beam, or actually I need a beam that is over 20 feet long. And fortunately enough, I've got this log here that is 20 feet 6 inches, which is going to be perfect, I hope. But the real challenge is my mill will only cut 16 feet. So I haven't done this before, but I've got an idea of how to do this and give myself a beam that will do the job. So stick around and we'll see if this works. So that should give you a general idea of the process I'm going to use to cut this log. I'm just going to cut it into a beam as far as I can on one end, and then flip it around and try to cut the other end so that they match, and we'll just see how well I do. Here I'm just putting in some wedges to provide some clearance so I can back the saw blade out. It was binding and pinched between the two pieces of wood, and if you try to force it, the blade could come off the track and just cause all kinds of problems. Here I'm just sliding the log back so I can have it sit on the bunk of the saw on one of the flat edges I've already cut. It was just way too heavy for me to move by hand, so I needed to use the excavator to slide it back just a few inches. So this process creates a lot of sawdust. I just collect it, as you see here, and give it to people who use it for their chicken coops, gardens, flower beds, and I just don't need it in my way. So it's looking really good. Everything's coming out to plan. It might be a little bigger than I want, though. I don't know that I can maneuver this size. Let me get my tape measure. Oh, so what we got is 10 by 10. And that is a lot of weight to maneuver. I think I'm going to shave it down a little bit more. Some of this bark off. Maybe flip it one more time. Might shoot for around an 8 to 9 inches and see what that gives me. So I realized as I was cutting this that a friend of mine had asked me to make a couple natural edge fascia boards for him for a shed he's building. And this is actually his log that I was going to use as a beam, and then we'd finish cutting it up later. I just messaged him with a picture, and he said that these offcuts that I'm doing now would be perfect. They're about 1.5 inches, 14.5 feet, 8 to 10 inches wide, and that they will be perfect for the project he has in mind. So I'm going to cut one more off of this other side, and then I will be down to clean wood for the beam that I want to make. Let's get it repositioned and spun around, and I'll show you what I was intending to do next. So here I put a couple 4x4s on the bunks of the mill. You can't see it real well, but they elevate the beam enough so that the uncut end has clearance, and just the cut end is setting on the bunks or on these supports to keep it parallel so I can line everything up. So now my plan should be pretty clear. I can trim off the rest of the end here. Definitely want to get that rock off of there. You can see those go in the saw blade. And just got this little short end to trim, flip it 3 more times, and hopefully I have a beam that I can use. Here you have a little better view of the 4x4 that I used as a spacer. I got 2 of these, and they just need to be exactly the same dimensions for everything to line up. So here I'm setting the blade down on the cut edge of the log, making a note of the measurement using the scale, which you can't see from where you're at. There's a scale on the side of the mill, and I'm just noting that measurement, so when I bring it back, I can use that measurement and line those cuts up. So I came pretty close. I knew there would be kind of a joint. Oops. Knew there'd kind of be a kind of a joint there. Get a good angle for you. But for what I'm using it for, it's going to be fine. So just flip it a couple more times, and I'll have it made. Here I realize that the uncut edge is too tall, and when I flipped it towards that side, it actually lifted the beam off of the 4x4s, so the cut wouldn't have been parallel. So that's why I'm flipping it 180 degrees in the other direction, and then I'll cut this thicker edge off first, and it won't be in the way. Blade's getting a little dull, but we'll be able to finish this log. That one, yeah, got a lot closer. Hardly a ledge at all there. And now the hard part is done. It's just flipping it 2 more times and taking those edges off, seeing what we get. All right, for my next trick, I'm going to try something I've never seen anybody do before, which is make a couple cuts. I won't be able to go all the way to the end because I don't have enough track, and then spin it around and try to meet those cuts. This beam is way too heavy right now. It's around, I think I measured it earlier, 8 by 9, 9 by 9 in that neighborhood. I want to take it down to about 5 by 8 or 9. It's going to give me a couple 2 by material. Going to give me a couple 2-inch slices approximately, and I'm just going to see if I can keep them the full 20 feet long, more or less for the fun of it. The hardest piece is going to be backing the saw out, which normally isn't a good idea, but I'm going to use the wedges, try to create the clearance, see if I can get the saw head to back all the way out. I'll make a couple slices, spin it around, and try to meet up with those, which is going to also be pretty tricky. So we'll see what happens. Well, all right, that was a piece of cake. No problem at all. There he goes. that did the trick. I want to now spin the log around, and that's going to be tricky because these top two pieces are not very well attached. Well, that went very smoothly, if I say so myself. Now to see if I can line up the blade to meet the cut that I made earlier. Let's see what we got here. So that is a little over an inch and 3/4, right? Inch and 7/8. So what I do is I just hang my tape measure from the log, or the beam now, I guess we could call it, and try to line it up with an 1 7/8. So I'm reading about 1 3/4 there. Ooh, that looks like it's about it. Hopefully you can see that. So if I'm lucky, I'll hit the mark, and we'll get a 20+ foot 2x8 or so. There's some bark in it, but I can trim it down later. There we go. Look at that. Worked. So I've got a pile of lumber here I got to clean up, but there it is, 20.5 feet or so. And the mark is moving it up. You hardly even notice it. So that I'm really happy with. So if I hit it again, this whole board should be free, and it is. Nice. Well, I said earlier, I hadn't done this before. This is just an idea, and I'm very pleased that it works. Extending the mill for a very seldom used length. You know, I can do 16 feet, but with this going 20 plus, I don't know that I could do 30. Theoretically, it's possible. I could actually do twice the length of the mill, but would there be enough room for me even to work or to spin something like that around? I don't know. I've heard of guys doing it other ways by sliding the boards through the mill. Then I can see where that would work to finish your cut, but I like this method so far. It's doing what I need it to do. So that leaves me with, that's about 8 3/4 by 5 1/4. See what I get down on this end. Eight 3/4, 5 1/4. So yeah, it's cutting straight. I think it was cutting a little bit angled just because of the weight of it and how it was sitting. I think the log was bowed a little bit. The 5-inch side is a little big. Well, actually, no, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it and try. I've got 8 3/4. I'm going to see if that will work. But I'm going to call that a Booming success. So here's a closer look at the finished beam. And yeah, very, very happy with that. Here's a close-up of where those two cuts came together. Let's say maybe a 1/8 of an inch, between a 1/16 and an 1/8. Not much of a hump right there. And just turned out really nice. Gonna do what I needed to do, and then it'll probably become smaller lumber that I'll need later. I like to cut these ones big, and then I keep them around. And if I need something smaller, I've got some raw material to work with. I don't have to start from scratch. Here's the seam on these 2x, and that is, yeah, hardly noticeable. I've seen stuff with spots like that at the lumber yards, so turned out very well.